Hello everyone, it's Miss Hinde-Taylor here, reading Chapter 11 of Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. Sorry for the delay, I've got really bad hay fever at the moment because all the pollen's out, so I've been sneezing, which is not conducive for reading a book. Anyway, so we're on Chapter 11, Heave. So, soon enough, Yarvi wished he had stayed in the flesh dealer's cellar. Heave! Trigg's boots ground out a ruthless rhythm as he prowled the gangway, whip coiled neatly in meaty fists, eyes sweeping the benches for slaves in need of its encouragement, blunt voice booming out with pitiless regularity. Heave! It was no surprise that Yarvi's withered hand was even worse at gripping the handle of a great oar than it had been the handle of a shield. But Trigg made Master Hnan seem a doting nursemaid in Yarvi's memory. The whip was his first answer to any problem, but when that did not cause more fingers to sprout, he lashed Yarvi's crooked left wrist to the oar with chafing thongs. Like a thong in this case is like a strip of leather, not the underwear. Heave! With each impossible haul upon the handles of that terrible oar, Yarvi's arms and shoulders and back burned worse. Though the hides on the bench were worn to a silky softness, and the handles to a dull polish by his predecessors, with each stroke his arse was worse skinned and his hands worse blistered. With each stroke the whip cuts and the boot bruises and the slow-healing burns about his rough-forged throat collar were more stung by salt sea and salt sweat. Heave! The suffering went far past any point of endurance Yarvi had imagined, but it was astonishing the inhuman efforts a whip in skilful hands could flick from a man. Soon its crack elsewhere, or even the approaching scrape of Trigg's boots on the gangway, would make Yarvi flinch and whimper and pull that fraction harder, spit flecking from his gritted teeth. "This boy won't last," growled Rolf. "One stroke at a time," murmured Giles gently, his own strokes endlessly strong, smooth, regular, as though he was a man of the wood and iron. "Breathe slow, breathe with the oar, one at a time." Yarvi could not have said why, but that was some help. Heave! And the rowlocks clattered and chains rattled, the ropes squealed and the timbers creaked, the oar slaves groaned or cursed or prayed or kept grim silence, and the south wind, that's the name of the boat, inched on. One stroke at a time. Giles' soft voice was a thread through the haze of misery. One at a time. Yarvi could hardly tell which was worse torture, the whip stinging or his skins chafing or his muscles burning, or the hunger or the weather or the cold or the squalor. And yet the endless scraping of the nameless scrubber's stone up the deck and down the deck and up the deck again, his lank hair swaying in his scar-crossed back showing through his rags and his twitching lips curled from his yellow teeth, reminded Yarvi that it could be worse. It could always be worse. Heave! Sometimes the gods would take pity on this wretched state and send a breath of favourable wind. Then Shadixaram would smile her golden smile, and, with the air of a long-suffering mother who could not help spoiling her thankless offspring, would order the oars unshipped and the clumsy sails of leather-banded wool unfurled, and would airily disclaim on how mercy was her greatest weakness. With weeping gratitude, Yarvi would slump back against the still door of those behind and watch the sailcloth snap and billow overhead, and breathe the close stink of more than 100 sweating, desperate, suffering men. "When do we wash?" Yarvi muttered during one of these blissful lulls. "When Mother Sea takes it upon herself," growled Rolf. Oh, so when the waves are there. That was not rarely. The icy waves that slapped the ship's side would spot, spray, and regularly soak them to the skin. Mother Sea washing the deck and surging beneath the footrests until everything was crusted stiff with salt. Heave! Each gang of 3 was chained together with one lock to their bench, and Trigg and the captain had the only keys. The oar slaves ate their meagre rations chained to their bench each evening. They squatted over a battered bucket chained to their bench each morning, and they slept chained to their bench, covered by stinking blankets and bold furs, the air heavy with moans and snores and grumbles and the smoke of breath. Once a week they sat chained to the bench while their heads and beards were roughly shaved, a defence against lice which deterred the tiny messengers not at all. The only time Trigg reluctantly produced his key and opened one of those locks was when the coughing Vansterman was found dead one chill morning, and was dragged from between his blank-faced oarmates and heaved over the side. The only one who remarked on his passing was Ankran, who plucked at his thin beard and said, "We'll need a replacement." For a moment, Yarvi worried the survivors might have to work that fraction harder. Then he hoped there might be a little more food to go round. Then he was sick at himself for the way he had started to think. But not so sick he wouldn't have taken the Vansterman's share had it been offered. Heave. He could not have said how many nights he passed limp and utterly spent, how many mornings he woke whimpering at the stiffness of the last day's efforts, only to be whipped to more, how many nights without a thought but the next stroke. But finally an evening came when he did not sink straight into a dreamless sleep. When his muscles had started to harden, the first raw blisters had burst and the whip had fallen on him less. The south wind was moored in an inlet, gently rocking. The rain was falling hard, so the sails had been lowered and strung over the deck to make a great tent, noisy with the hissing of drops on cloth. Those men with the skill had been handed rods, and Rolf was one, hunched near the rollock in the darkness, murmuring softly to the fish. "For a man with but one hand," said Gerald, chain clinking as he propped one big bare foot up on their oar, "you rowed well today." "Huh." Rolf spat through the rollock, and a clipping of Father Moon's light showed the grin on his broad face. "We may make half an oarsman of you yet." And though one of them was born long miles away and the other long years before him, and though Yarvi knew little about them that he could not read in their faces, and though pulling an oar chained in a trading galley was no high deed for the son of King Uthric of Getland, Yarvi felt a flush of pride, so sharp it almost brought tears to his eyes, for there is a strange and powerful bond that forms between oarmates. When you are chained beside a man and share his food and misfortune, share the blows of the overseer and the buffets of Mother Sea, match your rhythm to his as you heave at the same great beam, huddle together in the icy night or face the careless cold alone, that is when you come to know a man. A week wedged between Rolf and Gerald and Yarvi was forced to wonder whether he had ever had two better friends, though perhaps that said more about his past life than his present companions. The next day the south wind put in at Thorby. Until Smail, frowning from the forecastle, snapped and steered and bullied the fat galley through the shipping to the bustling wharves, Yarvi had hardly believed he could be living in the same world as the one in which he had been a king. Yet here he was. Home. The familiar grey houses rose in tiers, crowded upon the steep slopes, older and grander as Yarvi's eye scanned upwards, until, squatting on its tunnel-riddled rock, black against the white sky, he gazed upon the citadel where he had been raised. He could see the six-sided tower where Mother Gundring and her chambers, or had her chambers, where he had learned her lessons, answered her riddles, planned his happy future as a minister. He could see the copper dome of the God's Hall gleaming, beneath which he had been betrothed to his cousin Asurin, their hands bound together, her lips brushing his. He could see the hillside in view of the house of his ancestors, where he had sworn his oath in the hearing of gods and men to take vengeance on the killers of his father. Was King Odin comfortably enthroned in the black chair now, loved and lauded by subjects who finally had a king they could admire? Of course. Would Mother Gundring be standing minister to him, whispering her pithy wisdom in his ear? More than likely. Had another apprentice taken Yarvi's place as her successor, sitting on his stool, feeding his doves and bringing the steaming tea every evening? How could it be otherwise? Would Asurin be weeping bitter tears because her crippled betrothed would never return? As easily as she forgot Yarvi's brother, she would forget again. Perhaps his mother would be the only one to miss him, and that because, in spite of all her cunning, her grip on power would surely crumble without her puppet son perched on his toy chair. Had they burned a ship and raised an empty howl for him as they had for his drowned Uncle Uthal? Somehow he doubted it. He realised he had bunched his shrivelled hand into a trembling, knobbled fist. "What's troubling you?" asked Gerald. "This was my home." Rolf gave a sigh. "Take it from one who knows, cook's boy, the past is best buried." "I swore an oath," said Yarvi. "An oath there can be no rowing away from." Rolf sighed again. "Take it from one who knows, cook's boy. Never swear an oath." "But once you have sworn," said Gerald. "What then?" Yarvi frowned up towards the citadel, his jaw clenched painfully tight. Perhaps the gods had sent him this ordeal as a punishment for being too trusting, too vain, too weak. But they had left him alive. They had given him a chance to fulfil his oath, to spill the blood of his treacherous uncle, to reclaim the black chair. But the gods would not wait forever. With every dawn, the memory of his father would fade. With every noon, his mother's power would wane. With every dusk, his uncle's grip on Gatland would grow firmer. With every sunset, Yarvi's chances dwindled into the darkness. He would take no vengeance and reclaim no kingdom lashed to an oar and chained to a bench. That much was clear. He had to get free. And that brings us up to the end of chapter 11. Next time we'll be reading chapter 12, The Minister's Tools. Stay safe.